When I don't know something, I try to find somebody who does so I can ask them the questions that lead to the answers that inform us, especially about injuries, because I'm not a physio, I'm not an orthopedist. Yeah, I don't have a doctor in front of my name. So when we talk about the injuries about Caitlin Clark, Tyrese Haliburton, and Anthony Richardson, I want to get somebody on the channel. We don't do a lot of guests, but in this case, we make an exception, who can speak with some degree of, if not certainty, then education about these injuries. And Dr. David Chow is exactly that guy. He's the injury doc on the Believe Network that we're a part of and proud to be a part of. He can be followed on X at Pro Football Doc. Dr. David Chow is going to talk to us about Caitlin Clark and that strained groin, Tyrese Haliburton and the surgically repaired Achilles, and that shoulder that bothered Anthony Richardson post-surgery, right? I mean, he had that surgery to repair his right shoulder, and now, during OTAs, they had to shut it down a little bit. What's his prognosis? What are his prospects for playing a complete 2025 season?
Good morning. Thanks for making time here and between or about to start some surgery here.
Excellent. Well, our best wishes for those that you're going to use your talents upon this morning. We'll talk about Caitlin Clark. We'll talk about Tyrese Haliburton and Anthony Richardson, kind of do a look at all three of the major injuries in the city of Indianapolis in sports. Let's start with Caitlin Clark, who missed another game last night. She had the strained quad. Now she's got a strained groin in the same leg. And they say day to day with a strained groin, what I know about a groin is that they can be re-aggravated if you come back too quickly. How do you look at this injury with Caitlin Clark?
Well, first of all, one of the sayings I always say is injuries beget injuries, and there is some relationship, whether indirect or direct. And the second thing is groin strains are essentially never truly day to day. They're more week to week. And it's been more than day to day on Caitlin Clark already, where it's over a week now, I think, a couple games, 2 games missed, and who knows when she will return. But for your audience, and since it's probably a new audience, in no way, shape, or form am I criticizing any of the athletes or medical staffs or what they're saying. Look, I was on the other side. I was a head team physician for the Chargers for almost 2 decades. I worked in the NBA and baseball as well. What you hear on the outside is not always what you know on the inside. And so what we try and do at Sports Injury Central, sicscore.com, is give injury analysis as opposed to injury reporting. The injury reporting on Caitlin Clark is day to day. And that's sort of a hopeful statement, day to day. And looking at it, I think it's going to be longer. If you go back to her quad strain, they said 2 weeks. And I said, yeah, probably closer to a month longer. Now, she was really closer to 3. So give her credit. She came back a little bit early there. But this is what we do. We try and look at injuries, the video, the information, and give some analysis as opposed to just report what the team said.
Can coming back too early exasperate other things? Like, can coming back too early from the quad cause the strain that she's got with the groin?
Well, look, if you're waiting for athletes to return at 100%, you're going to wait a long time. And I think fans often expect athletes to play through some things, and I promise you they do. So my assumption is a competitor like Caitlin Clark is going to return when she feels like, and the medical staff clears her, when she's, let's say, 90% or 85%, right? To wait to 100 is a lot longer. Now, did playing through the quad contribute to the groin? I think in some at least indirect way it may have.
Let's talk about Tyrese Haliburton, Tyrese, and there are a lot, and specific to the Pacers, I think 8 different guys in the NBA this year tore their Achilles, but 3 of them with the Indiana Pacers, and that's kind of
all wearing all number zeros in the playoffs. 3 Achilles tears in the playoffs. Tatum, Jason Tatum, Damian Lillard, and Tyrese Haliburton all wearing number 0. I mean, that's crazy.
Is there a correlation?
Not to the number 0.
So, is there any way, like Kobe came back from his Achilles tear and it took roughly 8 months? There are others like Kevin Durant who took a little bit longer. Is there any way on the front end, just immediately post op, like Tyrese is, to say, okay, this looks like it's on the front end or it's on the back end? Is there any way to really look at a guy with a torn Achilles and give a relative kind of approximation of when he's going to be available again?
Well, here's the analogy I'll say. Everyone after surgery says it was a success. And every team and every GM after a draft, whether it's basketball or football or WNBA, says it was a success. But you can't judge success of a draft until several years down the road. You can't judge success of a surgery till at least several months down the road and see how the rehab is going and ultimately return to play. So it can be the goals of the draft may have been achieved, the goals of surgery may have been achieved, but how it works out is a different story. But there are different rehab techniques that can help accelerate things nowadays, including using something called blood flow restriction, etc. So I do expect Haliburton to be fully back. Here's the thing. The last time this happened in the NBA Finals was 2019. Kevin Durant, Golden State Warriors. And the number one question I got back then was, would you give him a max contract and will he ever be the same? Because everyone was looking at Kobe Bryant not being the same. But Kobe Bryant was a lot older in his career in terms of what happened. And I said, no, I do think he's going to return. I do think he's going to return to 100%. It may take a year, but he is going to return. And obviously, Durant has been fine since. So I'm glad there's not much conversation on Haliburton if he will return. It's just the conversation centered on when. And based on his style of playing things, could he play at less than 100% at some point next season? Maybe. But, he may end up just waiting the entire year. Look, if the Pacers do very well, and let's say without him, and let's say they go on a playoff run, are you going to just insert a Halliburton at that point in time? I mean, it's tricky. So, you got to give him some credit, Indiana fans. He played through knowing that there was a chance of rupture, I believe. After game two, we indicated that he likely had Achilles tendonitis on videos and other things based on how he limped coming off the podium, the tape job that he had. Obviously, game five, he had the calf strain, probably related. And we said, yes, there is an increased chance of Achilles tendon rupture, not a guarantee of, increased chance of. And look, he's playing to win the NBA championship in the finals. He is to be heralded for trying to play through it less than 100%, but unfortunately is paying the price now.
All right, let's talk about Anthony Richardson. Anthony had his shoulder rebuilt, basically, had the ruptured AC joint thing going and got that surgically repaired. And then in OTAs, just a month ago, not even a month ago, had soreness, so he had to shut it down and went and got a second opinion from a physician, the physician who performed the surgery. Is that problematic? Does that foretell something that ought to be concerning to Colts fans?
Well, yes and no. First of all, I'll try and be positive on the no side. Yes, indeed, it was his throwing shoulder. Yes, indeed, it was the same side as the AC joint reconstruction surgery. But I have yet to see direct evidence that it is the same exact issue that has cropped up again. The reporting that I've seen, and maybe you can add more color to it, is that it was the same side that he had the AC joint injury on and surgery. So the assumption is it's the same injury. It may not be an aggravation of the same injury. Unusual to aggravate the same injury. And if it was aggravated again, yes, that would maybe be more problematic. He's a throwing shoulder quarterback. There's all sorts of things that can flare up. Is it concerning? I think it is concerning from the point of view is that, they had to be safe to shut him down. And, at this point, this probably gives Daniel Jones the inside track, right? He's getting all the reps. And look, I like Anthony Richardson. However, I've said all along that, if you run out of necessity, look, my quarterback for a long time was Philip Rivers, the longest active streak, whatever. He did hit some injuries, but he never ran the ball. He always threw the ball away. He tried not to take sacks, and that's how you get longevity. If you look at the quarterbacks that have had lots of longevity, Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, Rivers. For the most part, they're ones that dump the ball and get rid of the ball. You know, the Aaron Rodgers tried to get hurt. Brett Favre probably was a little bit of a unicorn. My point is, Anthony Richardson runs out not just of necessity on third down and 10 to get the first down. He runs as part of the offense, so he takes more hits. He gets more exposure. His style of play, he's not injury prone. His style of play makes him more prone to injury.
Let me ask you, do you mind if I ask you a question about Philip Rivers? Because he
Sure.
was a quarterback here for a year,
Oh
and
yeah, I love Philip.
a great guy. Like you can't ask him a bad question. You ask him, how's your day going? You get 3 minutes of great quotes. With
And a
the
couple
torn,
dadgummits.
yeah, he doesn't swear ever, which is awesome because then no editing. He played, we always heard, with a torn ACL. How is he able to do that?
Well, happy to talk about it. I just chatted by text with Philip the other day, but I've talked about this before, so there's no HIPAA involved. If he didn't give me permission, I wouldn't be able to talk
Okay.
about it. He played with a torn ACL 6 days after an e-scope in that AFC Championship game. First and foremost, off of informed consent. Look, Indiana fans might not remember this, or if they do, they block it out of their memory. If you go to my Twitter profile page or X profile page, the header picture, if you look at it, you'll recognize it in an instant. It was the last game in the RCA Dome.
Yeah.
And that's where Philip tore his ACL, and we walked off together. And if you remember correctly, the storyline afterwards, first of all, after we won that game, it was pin drop silent. I've never heard the RCA Dome so quiet. I think every fan in that stadium was like, "Oh, Peyton's got this. He's going to come back and win." Right? That was like the assumption. There wasn't even a worry about it. But anyways, as we're walking off with Philip, fans were maybe shouting some four-letter words at him, as fans do. And Philip got caught on camera as I was walking off with him, being very, shaking his finger and very violent in his speech. And let me tell you, everyone thought he was swearing. I can tell you, he once again, all he said was, "Don't you worry, I'll be back. Don't you worry, I'll be back." Okay. And in the locker room, he lobbied to return to play that game before Billy Volek finished it off. And I had to convince him he couldn't, because I finally had one of the assistant athletic trainers that went off with me and said, "Okay, you go under center under this guy and see if you can take a snap." And he couldn't get under center. And that's finally what convinced him that he couldn't return to that game. We flew home. On the plane flight home, he was like, "I'm playing in the next game. I'm playing in the next game." And so we set up surgery the next morning, fixed the meniscus. He played with the brace. He wasn't 100%, but let's be fair. This is Philip Rivers, a
Yeah.
not exactly fleet-footed quarterback. This was not LaDainian and Tomlinson playing with a torn ACL. This was not, Quentin Jammer or star corner playing with a torn ACL. It was a pocket quarterback with informed consent. And actually, I just had Bill Belichick on my podcast, and he lauded Philip Rivers and said, "Yeah, he almost won that game, and they were nervous that AFC Championship game."
He was wonderful to have here. We loved him, and now we're trying to get kind of the same sort of behavior out of Anthony Richardson. So what we're saying about Anthony Richardson is it's not overuse, it's not throwing, it's not that kind of thing. When he has contact, that's when everything is at risk, including that right shoulder.
Well, I think it's just your entire body's at risk, right? I
Yeah.
mean, he hurt his shoulder trying to stretch for the touchdown in the corner of trying to get inside and score, and he did score. That's how he originally hurt the shoulder. It's like the risks that he takes laying his body out on the line to run the football. So it's not a criticism, it's just a fact that he's putting himself at more risk.
Thanks, Dr. Chow. Tell people again where they can find you and your superb injury analysis.
Well, the website is sicscore.com, Sports Injury Central. We talk about all sports. We're probably one of the main voices that, quite honestly, analyzes WNBA in Caitlin Clark and her injuries. We do injury analysis there, and on Twitter or X, it's Pro Football Doc.
Wasn't Dr. Chow awesome? That was just phenomenal. I love talking to Dr. Chow. I love talking to anybody who knows stuff about things I don't know about. And the perspective that he lent to the kind of injury situation for Caitlin Clark, which is a big deal. Not just a big deal for the Indiana Fever. Hell, that's a big deal for the economy of the state of Indiana. Because people come to Indianapolis to see Caitlin Clark play basketball. And if she doesn't play Thursday night against Vegas, you know what? That is a dent in the pocketbooks of people downtown, the business owners downtown. You talk about Tyrese Haliburton. Can he come back at any point during the 2025-2026 season? That was kind of interesting to hear what he had to say about that, and it sounds like there's really scant chance of it. And then with Anthony Richardson, it's not the shoulders so much, it's the whole body, because that guy puts himself at risk every time he tries to exercise his superpower, which is running the football. He says that's his superpower. I think it's his kryptonite. I think he's got to become, and I've said this for years, he's got to become more of a pocket passer, because you can't survive in the NFL as maybe a pass first, run barely not first quarterback. That's not an easy place to remain healthy at, even with the kind of physical specimen Anthony Richardson is at 6'4.5" or so and 255 pounds. He is a tank. That might work against him. And really interesting to hear, kind of as a sidelight, about Phillip Rivers and how he figured out how to come back with a torn ACL before he had that thing surgically replaced or repaired. And we remember that game at the RCA Dome. How sad was that? Quieter than Dr. Chow had ever heard. He was a team physician for the Chargers then. Interesting stuff. We'll be back this afternoon with Inside Indiana Sports Now. Cannot wait to talk to you then.